So I was really trying to rethink how do we make CoLab a really exciting place to work? I think we were also coming on the heels of some cultural challenges and just this period of pretty intense burnout. And, for me, coming from an investment banking background where 90 to 100 hours a week were pretty typical, I struggled to understand why are people burnt out? But I very quickly learned that it is not only sheer hours that contribute to that. It's a lot of things.
This podcast is brought to you by Hey Taco, the only peer-to-peer recognition platform that uses tacos to help teams around the world share gratitude. I'm Doug.
I'm Una.
This is our podcast, Amazing Teams. Hey everyone, welcome to Season 3 of the Amazing Teams podcast, where we explore all things that make work better. Today we are excited to be joined by Morgan Witham, the CEO of COLAB. Morgan, welcome to the Amazing Teams podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Tell us a little more about yourself and COLAB.
Sure. So CoLab was founded about 17 years ago. We are a digital agency that focuses on web, so strategy, design, development, and we really have a particular specialty around very high growth organizations. And in particular, coming on the heels of big transformational events. So for organizations that are undergoing a merger, post-acquisition, a big rebrand, or even just hyper growth. And then my background is pretty atypical, actually. I started my career in investment banking, specifically mergers and acquisitions. So I do not come from a digital background, although to the founder's credit, of CoLab, that was very intentionally why he hired me. So I could help focus on running the business. So how do we scale? How do we grow? How do we retain the best talent and not get sucked into the business, which is very accurate. I am utterly useless to our designers and developers.
How did that, Morgan, happen? Like, were you like, you know what? I'm just ready. I think I want to be a CEO next for like a tech company. And then you were looking around, or how did that happen?
Yeah, well, so I knew Eddie, the founder, for quite some time. I'd worked with his wife in my past life. And so I'd known him. I was starting to think about what was next in my career. And he had approached me with this opportunity to come on and help grow the business. He felt like, honestly, he says, started it kind of by accident. It was a hobby. And then all of a sudden he looked up and had a legit company that he really needed to help formalize and scale and grow. And he felt like that wasn't his strength. So he talked to me about it. And frankly, my first response is, why the hell are you talking to me about this? Like, I don't know shit about the digital agency space. I mean, I'm an investment banker. This is not my wheelhouse. And that was, like I said, really his point. So it took a little bit of courting, just a season of my life. I had recently found out I was pregnant with my second. So when he first approached me, it really didn't feel like the right time. But the more I talked to him about it, the more I considered, can I take my skill set from helping to run a pretty, at that time, large investment bank and advisory firm? Can I take some of that skill set into a smaller organization and really make a positive impact? And so, but it was a learning curve, that's for sure.
What was the hardest thing what was the thing that did not transition, or something that you had to learn anew?
Oh, man. Well, a couple things. So first, I'd say two things. One, the technology piece. So I don't even know if I've admitted this to our development team, and I'm quite embarrassed saying this, but I honestly went to Barnes & Noble and bought like a Coding for Dummies book, because I was like, okay, I at least have to speak their language so I know some of what they're talking about. And then I went to, I think in the first couple of weeks that I started, I went to one of their kind of weekly development meetings and just sat there and listened. And I mean, I was writing down all of these words and I was like, I have to go Google this. I have to go look this up. So I kind of recognized like, I'm going to have some limitations here in terms of my technical knowledge. That definitely took a longer time for me to really kind of get up the learning curve. And not that I'm remotely able to communicate with a lot of technical understanding, but I can at least understand the impact now. I think the other piece was different personalities. So I found that I came from a very homogenous population in my past career. And I don't mean that only in terms of it was primarily white males, but I also mean I learned that I was in a homogenous population of people who communicated all similarly, people who thought differently, people who approached. So I came from this environment where everybody spoke out loud. Everybody was very kind of type A. They communicated very quickly. It took me a while to learn that not everybody thinks and communicates that same way. And so I didn't even have that awareness when I started that, oh, people have different forms of communication, different or ways of communicating. Some people think out loud, some people don't. And so it took me a while to really understand that I didn't have exposure to a lot of different types of processing and communication styles before. And that took me a while. I think I perhaps came in and maybe kind of bulldozed conversations in a way that I wasn't even aware I was doing. So that took a lot of learning and some ego check along the way.
That's great. Well, you must be doing something right there at COLAB, because I did see that COLAB was recognized for being best place to work for 2025. So congrats to you on that achievement.
Thank you.
I'm curious, what makes COLAB the best place to work in Virginia?
I think a few things. And I will say, as I talk about the things that are working well, to be clear that is not without a lot of failures and learnings along the way, both as kind of accompanying our growth, but also on the people side. And I think what gets us there now are a couple things. And we also, I should say, were recognized recently for being an inclusive workplace, which is probably one of the things I'm most proud of in our work here. A few things, are interesting about our evolution. So during the time post-COVID, that period of, what people refer to as the Great Recession, we've really found this interesting phenomenon where the type of talent we were trying to find and hire and retain was the same talent that very large, Fortune 100 companies were trying to hire. We're a 25-person team, roughly, give or take. So we obviously don't have the bank account to afford the type of kind of incentives that they were offering. So we were finding that a lot of our talent was being poached by some very large organizations that are based here in Richmond. And it made it really challenging to hire from that perspective, because it just wasn't financially prudent for us to only kind of vie for talent based on salary and what we could offer. So I was really trying to rethink how do we make COLAB a really exciting place to work. I think we were also coming on the heels of some cultural challenges and just this period of pretty intense burnout. And, for me, coming from an investment banking background where 90 to 100 hours a week were pretty typical, I struggled to understand, why are people burnt out working?
Like, you're only working 60 hours a week. What are you talking about?
I know. But I very quickly learned that it is not only sheer hours that contribute to that. It's a lot of things. It's how are they connecting with their managers? Do they feel like they have a friend in the workplace? Do they feel like they have a team that's supporting them and has their back? What is for the time that they are working, what does that pressure feel like, when it's a client service businesses, which can feel very high pressure at times. And so I think we were trying to grapple with a lot of things. So we put in place and decided to pilot a 4-day work week, with the hypothesis being this is very unique. We've got to address burnout. We've got to address how we can compete with some of these very, very, high level employers. Is this a way that we can, really be unique? And so we piloted that. I think our benefits package as a result is pretty enticing. And we can talk about that in more detail. But I think we've also done a lot of work to embed these practices in our culture, whether it's our core values, it is, how we manage and develop our people. And we just have built in a lot of process and kind of expectations around that. I think it's also in who we hire. We are very particular in who we hire. And if we're hiring somebody that's going to manage other people, there's kind of a whole different analysis that we look at is can this person really help support and grow and be there for the team that they're managing? So I think it's a combination of some of our benefits and our processes. I think it is for sure our people. And I think it's also the recognition that this is a long game. This is not something, you don't change culture overnight. You hire people and you have a leadership team that is dedicated to it day in and day out, because it is these very small interactions and small measures of trust building along the way that it takes to build the team that feels just incredibly connected. And I think alongside that, taking some real initiative a few years ago from a DEIB perspective, where we decided this is important to us. It's important to us from a human perspective, but the reality is it's also important from a business perspective. And study after study shows the financial impact on businesses for having a diverse workforce. And in terms of retention, having a workforce where people feel a sense of belonging and feel included is just paramount. I mean, I think it's baseline expectations, quite frankly, but it takes a lot of education. It takes intentional policies that embrace that to get to a point where I think you really have a community and a team that feels like their impact matters. It feels like their voice matters. That feels like the work that they're doing day in and day out is important and that it's valued. So it's been a long road.
And it's never done.
Never done. Exactly.
Right? You're never like, oh, I'm done now. I can just stop doing everything I was doing.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your 4-day work week. People
Yes.
definitely toy around with it. They like the idea, but they might think that's kind of BS. Like, you still have to pack 40 hours a week or more now into 4 days. And what happens when the customers call you on a Friday and they need help? So
Yeah.
how did you go about it? Like, tell us more about the how, because I feel like a lot of people, they might actually do it if they even understood where to get started besides just saying we don't work on Fridays. But like, what do I do with the Fridays work?
Well, I'll be honest. So this kind of the first time I really started thinking about it was on the heels of an NPR report that I was listening to one morning in the car, and this was in I think it was in October 2021. And I was listening to this report. There is an organization, an international organization focused on studying the impact of a 4-day work week. And they were talking about the outcomes of this study that they had done, where they had their own pilot. They had organizations across the world as part of this, and they were really measuring the impact over time. And I heard this, and a couple things piqued my interest. One, in their reporting, they talked about how productivity actually increased. And I thought, well, that's counterintuitive because and let me also frame this as this is a 4-day work week, as in a shorter work week. So a 32-hour week, not a condensed
4 tens.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not 40 hours packed into 4 days. So this is a shorter work week. And I thought, well, that's counterintuitive. How can you be more productive with 20% less time? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And again, recognize that I'm coming from a very kind of jaded perspective of working just an insane amount of hours each week. So that just seemed kind of like bullshit to me. And I kept thinking about it, and I was poking all these holes. I was like, we couldn't do it. We're client services. Exactly like you said. What do you do on a Friday? We work on one of the metrics that we look at very closely is billable utilization. How many billable hours? Well, obviously, we're going to cut our financials by 20% if we do this. So, I had poked holes in it just left and right, and was like, well, this is silly. There's no way you can do this, at least in our industry, maybe some other industries, but this doesn't work in the agency space. But there was something in the back of my mind that was just gnawing on me. And it was like, well, I just couldn't let it go. And so I kept thinking about it. Like I said, this was in the time where we were having some very significant challenges in terms of hiring and in terms of retention. And I was already in the midst of thinking about different policies that we could consider, like unlimited PTO, or, we already had an incredibly rich benefits package in terms of insurance. And so I was trying to think of other creative ways that we could amplify our what was exciting about us from a benefits perspective. And I just couldn't drop it. So I started kind of picking off my leadership team one by one to pose this idea. And I always started it with like I know this sounds crazy, just because I thought, they're quite literally going to think, especially my COO, which I was like, she's just going to laugh at me because none of the numbers make sense. So I posed the question. I asked others to poke holes in it. They had even more holes to poke than I had even thought about. But, I started thinking, and one of the light bulb moments I had that propelled us to actually pilot it was, as I was thinking, it's not going to work. And what if we pilot it and it fails and we go back to a 5-day work week?
Yeah, that's even worse.
Yeah, it's even worse than I might as well have not started. And then I just kind of had this light bulb one day where I thought, okay, well, if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean there's not some other iteration that we could come up with. And so I got rid of this at first, it was very much black or white. It was like, can we do 4 days or not 4 days? And then I realized, well, okay, if it doesn't work, what if we do 2 4-day work weeks a month? Or what if we do, 1 Friday a month? Or what if we do half days, Fridays? I just started realizing that like this kind of all or nothing outcome has a way of really stifling organizations' willingness to try something new. And it was certainly stifling my creativity. So that kind of opened up this realm of possibilities of, okay, well, if it doesn't work, I believe that we can figure out some other solution. And, maybe it's 2 weeks of summer off or 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's. So I started rethinking, okay, this doesn't have to be exactly as we iterate it. And if it fails, it doesn't have to fail entirely. There are shades of gray that we can come up with. So that was kind of what promulgated us to say, okay, we're going to give this a shot. We are going to pilot this. And I think the other thing we realized early on, I was doing a lot of research. I found organizations that had done this successfully. I just started emailing or LinkedIning the owners or CEOs of these organizations and saying, hey, you don't know who I am, but I'm considering doing this. Can you tell me all the things that you messed up along the way that you wish you had known? And one piece of advice I got that held very true for us was include your team on building this plan. And we weren't, such a kind of top-down organization anyway. It didn't feel like this, leadership team giveth and then leadership team taketh away. And I think the other reality was I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know if this was going to work. I didn't know if our clients would revolt. I didn't know if we could do the work in less time. And so we decided to initiate a pilot for 3 months where we were going to be very clear about how we were going to measure whether or not it was successful. And some of those measurements were financial. Some of those measurements were going to be employee sentiment. Some of those measurements were going to kind of range in their objectivity and subjectivity. But we needed to have clear, measurable kind of things that we were tracking to determine whether or not it was working, and frankly, whether or not it was feasible and kind of sustainable from a business perspective. Because on the one hand, a business can be incredibly financially successful, but if it has a team that it can't retain, then that doesn't work. But the inverse is true too. I could have a wonderful team that is loyal and I'm retaining them, but if we're not profitable, then we'll cease to exist. So it really had to check all these boxes. And when we rolled it out to the team, we were very honest about what we know and what we didn't. In fact, the last slide of the presentation I was giving was shit we don't have the answer to. And it was like 20 bullets of things that we just didn't have the answer to. And the call to the team was, if we are able to do this successfully, it will be a result of all of you helping us figure out how to structure it. And if it doesn't work, then we will together pivot and figure out what an alternate solution is. But we are willing to try, was kind of the message I think that people heard. And I think, we were also very clear on why we were doing it. And we were doing it to A, be competitive in a hiring market, B, to retain the best talent, and C, because we felt like there was a different way of working that could benefit all of our lives and really kind of change how we thought about work. So we piloted it. We kind of established the KPI that we were going to look at. We set baseline metrics, which included kind of a survey of sentiment for folks that ranged everything from, how satisfied are you in your physical health? How satisfied are you with your friends and familial relationships? How energized do you feel at work? How creative do you feel? How much are you enjoying your team members? So we really kind of got a good baseline of how people were feeling at the time. After 3 months, we realized a couple of things. One, it wasn't a long enough pilot. So I had mixed data on the financial impact. And it was very clear data early on the sentiment impact. People, as one might expect, were very happy about it and felt their lives kind of starting to change pretty dramatically. But we had mixed results on the financial impact. So we decided to do it for another 3 months. And I was pretty blown away at the results. And, one thing I also realized midstream, which I also feel quite embarrassed to admit, is that so we decided to pilot the 4-day work week at the same time that we started an agile transformation and at the same time that we had hired 30% more of our workforce. That was entirely too much change at once. Even though I firmly believed at the time those changes were necessary, we needed more more people on the team. We needed to rethink how we were working on our projects with Agile and moving away from a waterfall project or process. So even at the time, I thought all those things were great. It really, frankly, pulled the rug out from under my team in terms of their kind of day-to-day, how they work.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I really think that was part of our kind of financial inconsistency in the first 3 months, is that it takes a while to onboard that big of a percentage of your team. We're changing up the processes. So there was just a lot of learning, and people were trying to figure out, how do I get this work done in less time?
Morgan, one question for you while we're on the topic of financials.
Yes.
So you went from 40 hours to 32 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to build the projects, right? So does it mean
Yeah.
you're billing the same amount of time, but you have less downtime in terms of unbillable work, whatever that means? Is that kind of what the math equation goes to?
So that is a great question. And that is a very big part of how we made it work, is that we kind of took a look and did this on a company-wide basis of, we are going to throw every single meeting, every single activity that we do on a week-to-week basis kind of in a spreadsheet. And we truly did like a keep, kill, combine exercise, which in hindsight, I'm now thinking this is just a good practice, I think, for any leader to take, because
Get rid of useless meetings, right?
yeah, because the meeting bloat happens kind of organically and unintentionally. And then before you know it, you're sitting in meetings for 7 hours a day. And that meeting could have been an email or a Slack. So yeah, we definitely had to cut back on some things. One of the things that we also had to cut back on was like professional development time during the work week. So, and I can come back to this a little bit later of how we dealt with that, because that was a side effect that none of us were all that crazy about, because we couldn't cut into billable time and still hit our financial goals. So it was primarily non-billable time, which meant some really healthy team time, but also meant we could cut out some fluff that was no longer needed. So yes, that's a great question. And we still do that. In fact, I think this kind of evaluation of meetings is a pretty good, regular, maybe quarterly practice to do, because it happens a little unintentionally. So that is how we made it work from a financial perspective. And then we did have to kind of shift around, how do we think about deadlines for clients? Because we also can't take longer to deliver than we were before. And so there were some changes to how we resourced our team members that needed to happen. So if we couldn't hit a deadline with a day less a week, then we would need to add more resources to that to still be able to hit some of these deadlines. So we did have some resourcing changes that needed to happen so we wouldn't negatively impact our clients. Which brings me to another key part of this. We had a really intentional client communication strategy as part of this, even before the pilot started, which is, here's what we're piloting, here's why we're doing it, here's what you can expect, here's who you can call if you're having any trouble at all. And this might have been the most surprising outcome of the 4-day work week pilot for us, which is none of the clients were upset about this. I mean, I was shocked. In fact, I can't tell you how many clients I talked to that were like, holy shit, that's brilliant, because they were having the same challenges that we were. They were having retention issues all over the place. And kind of their ability to be like, wow, that's a really smart way to retain good talent. I wish we did that. And I think our ability to still accommodate deadlines and still do what we need to do internally so that they didn't feel it externally was an important part of that. But I was pretty shocked how supportive our clients were on this change because I was not expecting that. I was kind of fully armed with communication and defense and preparation.
Justifications and
or to say, like, just call me on a Friday, like I'll get in there and figure it out.
Well, it looks like you're in there on a Friday, Morgan. I don't mean to call you out, but maybe
yes. Well, this would be your fault for
that is
scheduling.
our fault. That is our fault.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just
but well, what's so interesting is that is the reality that there are, I would say, more on the leadership team side that there is time on Friday that we need to spend doing things. So that is a very kind of real part of this. What I love about it so much is that Fridays are my thinking time. So Fridays are the time, at least in my role as CEO, I am in a lot of meetings and I am working with the team and helping making decisions throughout the week. Fridays are my time where I feel like all those ideas and things that I've been working on connect and I have quiet time, which is really hard for me to find during the work week. So yeah, and Fridays are also my like networking time, doing exactly this and meeting with people. And it took a little while. I mean, I think that's another thing to hit on during the course of the pilot. We actually did track, hours because we track time. through the course. And it wasn't an overnight 32-hour shift. I mean, I'd say at the 3-month level, I think the average was closer to 35, 36 hours. And then by the end, we slowly got down to an average of 32. And I say average intentionally because we are still a client services business. And that means every now and then things pop up that require a little heavier push than others. But we make a strong effort for that to be the exception and not the rule, which I think does kind of make us stand out in the world of agencies, because the agency lifestyle in a lot of places can actually be quite similar to what I was used to in the investment banking world. And COLAB just does not operate like that, because we spend a lot of time cultivating and training and working with our team members to have them turn. I think the average in this industry is like 1.7 years is the average tenure. I mean, we're celebrating a 9-year anniversary and a 4-year anniversary coming up. So it is such a detriment to the business, and it's costly in terms of actual financial impact, but also cost of knowledge. I mean, to have to not retain excellent talent, it costs a lot more when there's churn like that.
Morgan, I'm curious how you came to the decision of which day was going to be removed from the work week. And also, is it expected for people to be offline? Like, tell me how that works.
Yeah, both very good questions. So with regard to the day, at first we played around with the idea of, okay, maybe people can just pick which day they want to have off. And we kind of played out some scenarios of talking through what that would look like. And we quickly ruled that out because I think it became evident that if that were the case, then the onus was going to be on our project managers to be constantly navigating calendars and schedules. So I felt like that was actually going to be a detriment to some of our team members. Others wouldn't notice it and would be fine. But for those that are really working on scheduling with clients and having to figure out, oh, well, my designer's out that day and my developer's out that day. Oh, it wasn't going to work. So we realized pretty quickly that we needed some consistency. And from there, we thought about, is it midweek seemed pretty disruptive, 2 days, break 2 days. We thought about Mondays, but then Fridays, it was, I think a lot of people by 3:00 on Friday are done anyway. So it felt like that was the most natural day to choose. And so Friday was the day we picked. One of the decisions we made early on was during weeks where we have a midweek holiday, we will work that Friday. And my rationale for that was, we already have 52 new PTO days, essentially, as a result of the 4-day work week. And 2, our goal was not never work on a Friday. Our goal was to have a 4-day work week. So if Memorial Day, which is on a Monday, then we'll work that Friday. That way we pretty consistently have a 4-day work week. And it can help kind of offset, in a little bit of a way, tacking 52 new days onto what's already, I think we've got 11 holidays anyway. So that was the decision that we made. And then Doug, what was the second part of your question?
Yeah. Are people offline? Is there expectation that people are offline on Friday?
The expectation is that you're offline. In fact, this is what's interesting. I and my leadership team, I've asked them to do this. If you are having to do, something on a Friday, which is not my expectation, even of my leadership team, be cognizant about your Slack being up, because I was concerned that it would be this, we are saying one thing and demonstrating behavior of another. So the expectation is not that people are online on Fridays. So it is in fact, we have a Slack channel for that's #Fridays, Friday Fun. And so people are always posting pictures in the Friday Fun channel to show what they're doing on the 5th day. We should trademark this, as we've talked about. But what are you doing on the 5th day?
Did you change your PTO time as a result of this?
Yes. So what we changed in PTO was previously we had our PTO structure is based on tenure. So when you hit 3 years, you get more time. When you hit 6 years, you get more time. And we had 3 weeks is what we have when you start, then it bumps to 4 weeks, then it bumps to 5 weeks. The only thing we changed is that a week equals 4 days. So instead of 3 weeks of PTO being 15 days, 3 weeks of PTO for us is 12 days. So the effect of having the amount of weeks off is the same, but the number of days that you file for PTO is different. It's interesting because I really was heavily debating prior to deciding to pilot the 4-day work week, going down the path of the unlimited PTO, because it's quite popular now. And I did a lot of research into there are a bunch of organizations that have done research into how many days are people taking off, what's the sentiment. And time again, I kept coming back to when there is unlimited PTO, there is still this unspoken pressure that you can't actually take the time off that you want to take off. And people, frankly, end up in a lot of cases taking less PTO. And so it kind of felt like this. I wasn't looking for just a facade of something that made CoLab a better place to look for. I was looking for something that genuinely impacted people's lives. And I have seen very little data supporting unlimited PTO truly impacts people's lives. And I say impact people's lives because that is honestly some of the feedback we've gotten. When we finish the pilot, but we still get that in our engagement surveys each year. And people say that the 4-day work week has dramatically changed their lives. I mean, when you think about individuals that have small children at home, one of the responses we got from a kind of relatively new mom with 2 young kids was, I have one day to myself where I'm not working and I don't have little people clinging to my body. Or I've had people who have completely revamped friendships because they can now do more 3-day weekend trips to see friends. Parents who can spend Fridays catching up on laundry and grocery shopping, meal planning, doing all the stuff that it takes to run a house with 2 working parents and kids, and then actually have the weekend to spend with their kids. So when I say, this policy has resulted in changing people's lives, I'm not being hyperbolic about that. I mean, people are, my own included. I mean, it's drastically changed how I approach my work. And like I said, even on Fridays where I am doing work, it is my most creative, deep thought time, which is incredible.
Well, and the most fun work, obviously, right? As evidenced.
Yes, exactly. I'm talking to you. Yeah.
I have one question for you. It sounds like it helped on retention, right? It sounds like people are like, this is awesome. How did it help on your hiring efforts? Because that was one thing where you were kind of like, ooh, what do we do there?
Well, so it's interesting. At first, we actually didn't see the impact on retention. We saw it more on hiring. Like 95% of our new hires said that the 4-day work week was the number one reason that kind of tipped them over from our benefits to accepting our offer. So hiring out of the gate, I mean, we were getting ready to implement it. And I was already using that in my interviews by saying like, listen, it's not formalized yet, but we are getting ready to roll this out. And we had some of our best hires say, hell yeah, I'm coming on board for that. It was not a silver bullet for retention. And I think this is really important for business leaders to understand. I naively thought as soon as we rolled this out, nobody would ever leave CoLab. Because why would you willingly leave and be like, yes, please, I would like to work on Fridays? It does not solve underlying culture issues and challenges that need to be resolved. And so we were in the midst of working on refining our culture and really addressing some issues that weren't working for us and just some team situations and dynamics, and just our collaboration wasn't great, just some things that we really needed to address through the way we did work. It was not a silver bullet out of the gate. So that I think is an important takeaway. So hiring immediately, that was impactful. What's interesting is when as we have been tackling from kind of a multifaceted perspective, all the things that are involved in employees' engagement with their work and their desire to stay, that is where we are now seeing the benefits of retention. So we haven't had voluntary retention or voluntary termination in 2 years now, which I feel
amazing.
like I should knock on wood, which is incredible in this industry. And so it took a little while, but it's not a silver bullet. The 4-day work week is not a substitute for addressing other things that need to be addressed. But if you have a very strong culture, a very inclusive team, strong managers that care deeply about the people that they are leading and supporting, when you layer it on to what's already a highly functioning, highly engaged workforce, I mean, it's like rocket fuel.
That's awesome. Morgan, for someone who may be considering moving to a 4-day work week, what 3 quick pieces of advice would you give them?
Yeah. Time management. You really have to rethink, what does your schedule look like? And you can't I think everybody has a little bit of fluff kind of built into their 5-day work week where it's like, all right, I got a couple hours of downtime. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that. You have to be a lot more intentional about that. So sitting down, whether it's Sunday night or Monday morning, and really thinking through what needs to get done each day in order to get it done in less time. So you have to be a lot more intentional about that. I would say also communication is key with our team members. So we really had to ramp up communicating with team members about deadlines, expectation of being done, what needs to be done next, because you can't afford as much lag time in between those kind of communication periods. And I think the last is patience. It takes a little bit of time. So I think if organizations are shifting to a 4-day work week, thinking about it as an evolution or a process, not a single time change, is helpful. And I think you have to have patience about hitting the things that aren't working. So you will hit pitfalls. You may have a scenario where it's not working with the client. You may have a pitfall where you can't figure out how are we going to hit this deadline because I need additional resources and maybe those resources aren't available. So it takes patience to get to the point where it really feels smooth. But I think if you kind of level set and that's your expectation going into it, that this is a process and that you will iterate, then you'll set yourself up for success.
But to the question that we're still probably wondering, when client sends an email on a Friday, what happens?
So our clients know now. They know that we're a 4-day work week. It's written into our contracts. We talk about it early when we onboard a new client. Of course, there are times where emergencies pop up, and we do have kind of an off hours like emergency email and phone tree that we use if we need to jump on something. But like I said, it is very few and far between. So 90% of the time, they know that Friday email will be responded to first thing Monday morning.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, this has been super insightful. But before we let you go, we're going to talk about gratitude.
Yes.
As you know, with Hey Taco, everyone has 5 tacos to give every day.
Yep.
And you can use those tacos to recognize someone for something they've done or to simply show your appreciation. Who are you giving your 5 tacos to today and why?
Oh, I love this, which I will say COLAB is huge on gratitude. A, in the form of tacos. We give out tacos just left and right. And B, just in terms of, I think our team is genuinely thankful, appreciative, and loving of their fellow team members. So I love tacos so much. So, okay, today I give 1 taco to my chief product officer who went to Atlanta with me earlier this week for a biz dev conference. I loved using him as a sounding board. And it's so interesting when you go to things and you hear one thing and somebody else who heard the exact same thing has another takeaway. So I give him a taco. I give one of our developers a taco whose birthday is today. In fact, maybe I'll give him 2 tacos. I give our COO a taco because her 9th anniversary is Sunday, which is just insane. And then I give our senior software engineer a taco because his 4-year anniversary is tomorrow. So we got a lot of birthdays and anniversaries, which always get all the tacos.
Amazing.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. This has been great. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great talking to you both.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks for listening. One of the important things about building a team is gratitude. If you're looking to add more gratitude into your team, check out heytaco.com. We are clearly biased, but it really does work. Use the code AMAZINGTEAMS to receive 15% off for the first 3 months of your subscription.